Okay, hi. So we're here, and yeah. So today I was like, let's learn something new. And for the past few weeks, I've been interacting with a lot of people who have been into coffee. Coffee is like something that, for us normies, that is me. That I was a normal person. I don't really care about coffee. To me, coffee is just like, yo, just get some coffee. Let's just make it like just add to the milk. Let's brew it up. Let's heat it up. Add some sugar and let's just have a drink. Let's have a sip. That's all coffee was to me. But the thing is, coffee is a big thing for a lot of people, and a lot of people take coffee very seriously. And I was like, okay, so who cares? But then at the same time, I felt like, yo, and people say that to cars, like, yo, who cares about cars? They're the same thing. They're just moving you to point A to B. But that's not true because cars are much more than that. There's much more to cars. There's the emotion. There's the engineering behind it. There's the development, the stories, and there's a lot of things behind it. And well, then I could understand why there are coffee nerds and why people feel that way about coffee. So I was like, yo, so why not just spend the day like a few hours just researching about coffee and what it is? Because I don't really know anything about coffee. I'm just a newbie, very new to the scene. So that's what I did. And let's say after a few hours, I learned something. So I have some notes here. And look, this is not a script, okay? So I'm just gonna, go point by point, like start from the basics of what I learned up to something a little intermediate or something that kind of makes sense to us on the daily basis of, yeah, I've heard this term before, yeah, I know this. So that's how I want to take it. And this is not, if you're a coffee nerd, then I'm really sorry. This is just me just telling what I learned. This is not something that I'm explaining because I know this topic really well. I don't really know anything about it. It's just whatever I learned, it's gonna convey it to you. And if you are new, you don't know anything about coffee, maybe you can learn something from this. And if not, still just appreciate my stuff. Anyway, so first of all, the first thing about coffee is the coffee, the coffee plant. So what the coffee plant is it's a fruit, and for us, the fruit for people who want coffee, the fruit is what it comes from. What we think is that coffee just grows from a plant, from the bean, then we just take it out from the plant, and we go on to the entire process. But that's not the case apparently. So there's a fruit. The coffee is basically fruit, and from the fruit, inside the fruit, there's the bean that we need. And so basically, from the fruit that is cherry, the beans are extracted. And the thing is that how it is extracted is also very important process, and it affects how the flavor of the coffee is and a lot of stuff basically. And that is how it is extracted. So there are two ways of how coffee is extracted. The first way is the washing way. Now, washing, as the term suggests, is, yes, coffee beans are washed. The coffee is the coffee fruit is washed, and basically the pulp and everything is taken off in the washing process. And what you're left with is the bean itself. And then the bean is left to dry, and then it's used for the further process further. Yeah, that's basically what the washing process is. This next process is called the natural process. Yeah, the natural. It is a natural process. So, as the name suggests, it's natural. So what happens is that what coffee farmers do is they just leave the plant as it is, the fruit as it is, out in the sun for 20 to 30 days. Sorry, 10 to 15 days. And so what happens is that when you leave something like that, when you leave like an apple or something, it rots, right? If something happens, it does rot. So when you leave the fruit as it is for that a set period of time out in the wilderness, out in the sun for 10, 20 days, so it starts to ferment, right? So when it starts to ferment, there's a reaction going on, and which there's a metabolism reaction going on, and which it breaks down the sugars. And so when you use this process, is the beans kind of end up in the most fruity, the more sugary flavor compared to the ones that are done by the washing process. And so that's how it can affect the flavor. And that's why I said that how you extract the bean is also very important in the taste. Now, the first step we've done, we've extracted the beans, we've collected the beans. Now, the second important thing is where we get our coffee from. And yeah, this is also a very, very key factor on how it coffee is. Like, we see a lot of companies like brag, hey, our coffee is from, let's say, South America, from Brazil. Our coffee is from Indonesia. Our coffee is from somewhere, the North Pole. If it grows there, it survives there, then it's from there. So that also makes a difference because every country, every place that the coffee grows in has a different climate, a different temperature, and where it is grown is also very different. Like, for example, for understanding about where it's grown and everything, why it affects it, we'll take two examples. The first example we have is Indonesia, and the second example is Ethiopia. So Indonesia is an island taken, and it's a rocky terrain, it's an island and everything. The altitudes are not very high where the coffee beans are grown, and so the plant in yeah. So what happens is that I kind of mix up the points. I don't think I need it. So the plant in low altitude region, it just grows as it is, and it produces a typical flavor that it's mass produced. A lot of companies like Starbucks and basically every mass produced coffee company then takes the coffee beans from low altitude regions, and that taste that you get from those regions is same. Now, if you're talking about Ethiopia, so the regions over there are a bit of hilly regions, and high altitude regions is where the plant is grown, the coffee is grown. And so what happens with that is that uh, an example would be that when we climb mountains, the higher we go on altitude, the lower the oxygen levels are. And so our body, what it does is tries to compensate for the low oxygen. It breaks down and uh, it produces a chemical which I'm not able to recall at this point, which compensates for the low oxygen. Okay, and in coffee's case, that's very interesting. Is that it also does the same thing. It produces lactic acid. Okay, lactic acid. That's what I'm saying, which adds a more sweet and fruity flavor to the bean, and that happens because there's not a lot of oxygen and not a lot of respiration that the plant can do. That's why it has to resort to these measures to grow, and that is why uh, coffee from regions that are much higher altitude are going to be slightly more fruity and sweet in flavor. Interesting. Okay. Now, we've got the beans. We've extracted the beans. We've got the beans in our hand. And now we're going to the next process. That is not a process, but like a preference. It's the roast. So now, as the name suggests, it means how long that the bean is in the oven. How long are you cooking it? The bean is what roast refers to. And so what happens is that what in the case of roast, it's very similar to when you're making, uh, let's say, beef, medium, rare, etc. So if you want the most authentic and most close to the bean's flavor, then the lower you roast it, the better. When you don't roast bean at all, or a lighter roast, so what it does is that the bean's original flavor is retained as much as possible. And if you want to taste that specific bean, then lower roast is what you should do. Now, if you want some extra darker chocolatey, more rich flavors, more darker flavors, the smoky flavor that you get, then you should go for a dark roast. So this means that the bean has stayed in the oven much longer, and hence why it produces a more smoky, more dark, more chocolatey, you could say, flavor. But then the bean's original taste is not as present as it was in the compared to the lighter roast. So yeah, that's something that you should keep in mind. Now, we've talked about extraction, how we extract it, from where we extract it, about the roast, and next we've come to what, uh, yeah. So before we go to how we are gonna brew it, I want to talk a little about the main reason why people drink coffee, and that is caffeine. Now, what is caffeine? Now, caffeine is what people call as an imposter. It's an imposter for adenosine. It is very similar to adenosine. Adenosine is a compound that is found in our body, and what adenosine does is that when our body is tired, what adenosine is that compound which makes our body relax, which makes our body go into a more relaxing state. Our brain, it starts to uh, put it into a more relaxing state. It wants it to like slow down. It stops the adrenaline in the body and wants us to be in a state that is a rest state. That is what caffeine does. And what adenosine does is that it imitates uh, what caffeine does is that it imitates adenosine. It has a similar structure to adenosine. But the thing is that what it does is that it stops the body from going into a rest state, and it makes the body start producing adrenaline again. And so what caffeine does is it does not make us have new energy. It just stops our body from going into a rest state. That's what caffeine does, and that's something you need to understand about caffeine. So yeah, that's about caffeine. Next is how we brew a cup. So there are two most popular processes for brewing a cup. The first one is a French press, okay, and the second is a Chemex. Now let's talk about the French press. What the French press does is that the bean and warm water sit together for 5 to 10 minutes and are soaked together. So what happens is that when the bean starts, uh, releasing all its flavors and everything, and it's a more heavier and more stronger taste. That's what happens. Sorry, I mean the coffee. The bean is done. We're done with the bean. Sorry. Now we have the granules. We've roasted it and everything. Now we have the granules. The coffee powder, you could say, and that's what is kept with warm water, and that is the French press. Now, the other most common process that is used, or the most faster process, is Chemex. And so, what happens is that coffee is here, and water is poured down, and water interacts with the coffee powder for like a few seconds, and then it comes down, and that's what accumulates. That is the Chemex process. It is there only for a few seconds, so it's not as heavy and dark and thick compared to French press. And so that's the two main processes. I can't go deeper into that because that's how much I know about it. And now we're going to talk about the three basic drinks that we have. Uh, Fuck that. Let's just go a little deeper. I have some more. So, I'm going to talk about something that you all, if you've ever had coffee or if you've ever gone through a coffee shop, you've probably seen it somewhere, or you've maybe heard someone mention it. Are the coffee types. Like, so we'll categorize coffee into two types. The first we have is the standard coffee that is free from any dairy-based solution, that is only water-based, and that is, let's say, I'd call it black coffee because there's no white in it. Just kidding. So we have dark coffee or black coffee, and then we have dairy-based coffee. Okay, now dark coffee is popular, but dairy-based coffee is probably much more popular. First, we'll talk about dark coffee. So, dark coffee, the first most commonly heard is an espresso. So, the ratio of espresso is that it is 1:2. That is, espresso means the content of coffee is 1 and the ratio of water is 2. So 1 part espresso, 2 parts water. That is an espresso. It's a shot, it's a very small shot, and it's for quick energy if you want. Like quickly just do a shot, that's all you want. The next is this ristretto. That is a short espresso. It's even smaller than espresso, but then the ratio is 1:1. That is 1 part espresso, 1 part water. So this is pretty strong, man. This is pretty strong stuff. I don't know how you drink it, but probably people drink it like that. And the third one is called the lungo. It is a much longer espresso. That means that 1 part coffee and 3 parts of water. So it comes in a much taller glass and everything, and it's not as strong as the espresso shot or the ristretto is. And the next we've come to the double espresso, and it's also known as doppio. So it's a much more bigger glass of espresso, but also in the same, uh, it's the same as espresso. Yeah. And then we have Americano. Americano is the 1:2 espresso to water ratio. It's pretty popular. Americano is very popular, and espresso is very popular. Kind of get confused here, but yeah. Now, we're on to dairy-based coffee, and this is the most popular coffee, you could say. Like everyone, you've probably heard of a few. Everyone's saying, "Hey, I had this, I had that." And the first one is latte. Okay, latte is 1 part of coffee, and 3 parts of steamed milk. Is a lot of milk inside. It's not very strong, but yeah. The next we have cappuccino. Cappuccino is the most popular drink. So we have 1 part coffee, 1 part steamed milk, and 1 part cream. That is milk foam. That is 1 part. So we have foam, we have the espresso, and we have the steamed milk. It is 3 parts. Next, we have flat white. So we have 1 part of coffee and 2 parts of steamed milk. It's much more stronger, and I don't know if you have it or not. And the next one is mocha. Mocha is originated from the Lebanese area, I think, and it is 1 part espresso, 1 part steamed milk, and 4 parts of chocolate. I need a half mocha. I'll let you know if I have it. And the next one is macchiato, and this looks crazy, man. 2 parts of coffee, and 1 part of steamed milk. This is pretty strong stuff, man. How do you have this? And the next final one is cortado. This is like a 1:1 mixture. I mean, pretty strong. It's similar to like espresso, I guess. Not espresso, I mean ristretto. Pretty interesting. And so yeah, that is all I learned about coffee. I know it's not on a very intermediate level, but this is like a beginner level, I guess you could say. You could say I just scratched the surface. And so if you learned anything, I'd be more than happy. I'm really happy to hear that if I made you learn something. And if not, then hey, sorry. Maybe I'll improve next time. So that's it, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.